This story ends with new rules, new warnings, and one very expensive lesson about punching Deathworld species. Look, nobody at Kruthed Station Academy expected the semester to end with a complete restructuring of the Interspecies Conduct Handbook. But here we are, and it all started because Vexthor and Salakit, that absolute monument to unearned confidence, decided to put his manipulator appendage where it absolutely did not belong. Kruthed Station Academy, for those not familiar with the institution, sits at the crossroads of 17 major trade routes and serves as the premier educational facility for the Galactic Council's elite offspring. We are talking about the children of ambassadors, corporate magnates, military commanders, and the occasional hereditary monarch who still thinks titles matter in the 34th century. The tuition alone could fund a small colony for 3 years. The waiting list, longer than a Vrelnak's mating tentacle, and significantly less pleasant to deal with. The Academy prided itself on diversity. 63 species represented in the student body, state-of-the-art environmental controls that could shift from methane-rich atmospheres to aquatic chambers in under 4 minutes, cuisine from across known space. Though the less said about the Glorthian nutrient paste, the better. Everyone got along. Everyone followed the rules. Everyone understood the delicate social hierarchy that kept hundreds of apex predators, hive minds, and silicon-based philosophers from turning the dormitories into a war zone. Then the humans showed up. The cafeteria on Sub-Level 9 catered to oxygen breathers with carbon-based biology, which meant it was always packed during third meal rotation. Vexthor held court at the central table, as was his custom. The Salakit species stood roughly 8 feet tall, built like someone had decided to stack muscle on top of bone on top of denser muscle, then wrapped the whole thing in gray-blue hide that could stop most small arms fire. Their homeworld pulled nearly 3 times standard gravity, which meant Vexthor could, and frequently did, treat most other species like particularly fragile furniture. Cassidy Morgan stood in the food distribution line, tray in hand, minding her own business. She was new. 3 weeks into the semester, part of the human integration program that the Galactic Council had pushed through over significant opposition. Nobody knew quite what to make of humans yet. They looked harmless enough. Soft skin. No natural armor. No claws or fangs worth mentioning. Bipedal, which was common enough. They came from some backwater planet called Earth, recently declared a protected Deathworld, though everyone assumed that was political classification inflation to get them a seat at the table. The argument started over something stupid. It always does. Vexthor wanted the last serving of something called chocolate cake, apparently a human delicacy that the kitchen staff had prepared as a cultural accommodation. Cassidy had reached it first. Words were exchanged. Vexthor, surrounded by his usual crowd of sycophants and hangers-on, clearly felt his reputation required defending, so he shoved her. Not hard, by his standards. Just a casual backhand to the shoulder, the kind of dismissive gesture he had used on dozens of other students who did not understand their place in the social order. The kind of move that said, "I am bigger, I am stronger, and you will move." Cassidy did not move. She turned, slowly, and looked at him. Really looked at him. Her facial expression did not change. She did not raise her voice. She simply stood there, holding her tray, with chocolate cake that she had fairly claimed, and Vexthor, interpreting this as defiance rather than the warning it actually was, made his second mistake. He reached out with his primary manipulator, intending to physically remove her from his path. His appendage connected with the side of her head. The sound echoed through the cafeteria, a solid thwack that made everyone within 20 feet stop eating, stop talking, stop breathing. 300 students from 40 different species froze in place, waiting to see the inevitable result. The fragile human would crumple. Medical would be called. There would be an incident report. Vexthor's family would make some donations. Life would continue. Cassidy's head moved approximately 4 degrees to the left from the impact. Then she straightened up, rolled her neck once, twice, and locked eyes with Vexthor. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Vexthor, for the first time in his privileged, gravity-fed life, felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. His manipulator throbbed. Actually throbbed. He looked down at it, confused, and saw the primary joint already beginning to swell. Cassidy took a bite of her chocolate cake, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed before speaking. "You are going to want to get that looked at," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "Hitting bone tends to hurt, Even for someone as tough as you, clearly think you are." Then she walked away, leaving Vexthorin standing there, cradling his rapidly swelling appendage, while 300 pairs of eyes from 40 species watched his face cycle through confusion, pain and the dawning realization that he had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. The silence lasted exactly 5 more seconds before the cafeteria exploded into noise. Security Chief Brontahal arrived at Sub-Level 9 cafeteria within 90 seconds of the alert, which was impressive considering he had 6 legs and the turbolift was undergoing maintenance. He was a Kefrit, built low and wide, with sensory organs that could detect emotional pheromones from 3 corridors away. Right now, those organs were telling him the cafeteria was absolutely soaking in panic excitement and a concerning amount of vindictive satisfaction. All right, everyone, back to your meals. Nothing to see here," he announced, his translation collar rendering his clicking speech into flat Galactic standard. This was a lie. There was clearly something to see, specifically Vexthor and Salkeet sit at the medical station table, his manipulator appendage swollen to twice its normal size, while his entourage hovered around him like concerned satellites. "She attacked me," Vexthorn was saying, his voice tight with pain and indignation. "That human, she hit me." Bronthal pulled up the security footage on his wrist display. He watched once, twice, a third time because his brain refused to process what his sensory organs were clearly showing him. He zoomed in on the impact point, enhanced the audio, checked the timestamp to make sure this was not some student prank with edited video. No, Vexthorn had definitely struck first, and the human had definitely walked away without so much as a stumble. "You are going to want to revise that statement," Bronthal said slowly. "What I am seeing here is you initiating physical contact with another student. Twice." The crowd of students had not dispersed. If anything, it had grown. Pipariska, one of Vexthorin's usual associates, a slim Varanthi with excellent pattern recognition, was furiously scrolling through her datapad. Her face, or what passed for it, had gone pale. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no. What?" demanded Krilshan, another of Vexthorin's group. "I looked up Earth. The actual classification files, not the summary we got in orientation." Pipariska's voice climbed half an octave. "It is a Class 12 Deathworld. Class 12. The briefing packet said Class 7. Someone made a typo. Or they lied. Or, oh, ancestors preserve us. They rounded down for political reasons." The surrounding students started pulling up their own data pads. The cafeteria filled with the sound of frantic searching and increasingly horrified realizations. Humans had been admitted to Krathazek Station Academy as part of the Galactic Council's latest diversity initiative, pushed through by the diplomatic corps over the objections of, well, pretty much everyone who worked in education. The humans wanted a seat at the big table. They wanted their offspring educated alongside the elite of galactic society. They had resources, trade goods, and a surprising amount of leverage for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. The compromise had been simple. Admit a small number of human students. Observe, evaluate, see if they could handle the rigorous academic environment without, dying or causing an interstellar incident. Nobody had bothered to do a deep analysis on human physiology. Why would they? The preliminary scans showed them as soft, squishy, vulnerable, standard carbon-based life. They required roughly 1 standard gravity, breathed oxygen, 8 organic matter, boring, harmless. The Salkeet, by contrast, everyone knew about, high-gravity world specialists. Their children were born into twice standard gravity and thought it was relaxing. By the time they reached adolescence, they could operate comfortably in environments that would crush most species into component molecules. They were tough, they were strong, and they knew it. Vexthorn came from old money and older arrogance. His family held significant mining interests across 4 systems. They donated generously to the academy. They expected, quite reasonably from their perspective, that their son would be treated with appropriate deference, that he would dominate socially and physically, as was his birthright. That birthright was currently throbbing in time with his circulatory system while a medical drone scanned it and made disapproving beeping sounds. Headmaster Quilnrex received the incident notification while in the middle of a virtual conference with the Board of Governors. He was a Threndil, a species known for diplomatic skills and the ability to see 12 moves ahead in any political scenario. Right now, he was seeing exactly 0 good outcomes from what his datapad was telling him. "Excuse me," he said to the board members, his 4 eyes rapidly cycling through colors that indicated stress. "We have a situation." He read the preliminary report, then the security footage transcript. Then he put his primary manipulators over his face and made a sound that the translator struggled to render, settling on profound dismay with undertones of existential dread. "Get me everything we have on human physiology," he said to his assistant. "The real files, not the orientation summary. And someone find that human student before this turns into a full diplomatic incident." His assistant, a competent young Frillian named Tessica, nodded rapidly. "Sir, should we contact the Sulkite family?" Quilrex's eyes cycled to a deep purple. "Oh, they are going to contact us. Probably in the next 10 minutes. Prepare the shielding for my communication console. This is going to get loud." Back in the cafeteria, Cassidy Morgan had found a quiet corner table and was finishing her chocolate cake. She had her datapad open, working on what appeared to be homework for Xenobiology 301. She looked utterly unconcerned with the chaos she had inadvertently triggered. Brontal approached carefully, his sensory organs picking up absolutely nothing from her. No fear, no aggression, no elevated emotional state whatsoever. "Miss Morgan," he said, "I am going to need you to come with me." She looked up, swallowed her last bite of cake, and nodded. "Sure. Am I in trouble?" "That," Brontal said slowly, "is an excellent question. I genuinely do not know yet." The medical bay on level 4 was designed to handle every major biological classification in the known galaxy. It had isolation chambers, regeneration tanks, biochemical synthesizers, and one very tired Dr. Hellanth, who had been 3 hours away from end of shift when the alert came through. Dr. Hellanth was a Prixian, which meant she had excellent fine motor control, 6 specialized sensory organs, and absolutely 0 patience for stupidity. She had been working at the academy for 12 years. She had seen every kind of student injury possible. Sports accidents, lab explosions, that one incident with the zero-gravity mating ritual gone wrong that nobody talked about anymore. This was new. "Let me see if I understand correctly," she said, waving her scanning apparatus over Vexthorin's swollen appendage. "You struck this human student, with your primary manipulator, at approximately 40% of your full strength. I barely touched her," Vexthorin protested, though his voice cracked slightly. The pain medications were helping, but not enough. It was nothing. A tap. She should have moved. Uh-huh. Dr. Hellanth pulled up the scan results on her display. Her sensory organs, all 6 of them, focused on the data. Then refocused. Then she made a whistling sound that her species used to indicate profound confusion. "Your primary metacarpal joint is fractured. The secondary support structure is cracked in 3 places. You have severe tissue damage, consistent with high-velocity impact against a dense, unyielding surface." "That is impossible," Vexthorn said flatly. "I am Salkite. Our bone structure can withstand 12 times standard gravitational pressure. Our striking force is measured in the thousands of pressure units. She is human. They are soft. Everyone knows this." "Everyone," Dr. Hellanth said slowly, "appears to have been working with incorrect data." She pulled up Cassidy's scan on the adjacent display. The human sat on the examination platform, legs swinging slightly, looking about as concerned as someone waiting for public transportation. Dr. Hellanth had run every diagnostic she could think of. Twice. "Miss Morgan," she said carefully, "you have a mild contusion on the left temporal region, approximately 2 centimeters in diameter. Minor capillary damage, no concussion. No structural damage, no neural trauma." She paused. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," Cassidy said. "Little annoyed I dropped my cake during the walk over here. That was the last piece." "You dropped your cake?" Dr. Hellanth repeated the words like they were in a language she had not yet learned. "You were struck by a Sulkite with enough force to fracture his own appendage, and you are concerned about cake. It was really good cake." Vexthorin stared at her. Really stared. The pain medication was making everything slightly fuzzy, but even through the chemical haze, his brain was trying to process something that did not make sense. Could not make sense. He had hit her. He had felt the impact. She should be in the regeneration tank, not sitting there complaining about dessert. "What are you?" he asked, and his voice came out smaller than he intended. Cassidy tilted her head, considering the question. Human. Exchange student. Xenobiology major. Currently pretty hungry because someone made me miss dinner. Security Chief Bruntal, who had been standing quietly in the corner reviewing footage and incident reports, cleared his throat. Dr. Helent, can you explain what happened here? In terms that those of us without medical degrees can understand. Dr. Helent pulled up a comparative analysis on the main display. Salkeet's skeletal structure, while impressive, is optimized for their home environment. High gravity, yes, but within predictable parameters. Their bones are dense, their muscles powerful, but they evolved in a stable environment with consistent physical laws. She highlighted Vexthorin's scan. When this student struck Miss Morgan, he expected her skull to have approximately the density and give of, say, a Varanthi or Frillian cranial structure, something that would absorb impact, deform slightly, allow for force distribution. She pulled up Cassidy's skull scan. Even to non-medical personnel, the difference was visible. The bone density was ridiculous. The structural integrity looked like something you would find on armored vehicles, not organic life forms. Human skeletal structure evolved on a death world with highly variable and often extreme environmental pressures. Their bones are not just dense, they are engineered through millions of years of evolution to withstand catastrophic impact, rapid acceleration, and persistent high-stress loading. Miss Morgan's skull did not deform. It did not flex. It did not give at all. Dr. Helent zoomed in on the impact point. When Vexthorin struck her, it was functionally equivalent to striking a Durasteel bulkhead. With his bare manipulator, at speed, the room went very quiet. But she is so small, Vexthorin said weakly. She looks fragile. Yes. Well, apparently looking fragile and being fragile are two entirely different things. Dr. Helent closed the displays. Your species evolved to handle high gravity. Miss Morgan's species evolved to survive high gravity, extreme temperature fluctuations, aggressive megafauna, pandemic-level diseases, and according to this file I just pulled up, something called Australian wildlife, which I am not going to think about too hard because it is giving me anxiety. But the orientation material said humans were Class 7. Piperiska's voice came from the doorway. She had followed them to medical data pad clutched in her manipulators. Class 7 is manageable. Class 7 is normal-ish. The orientation materials, Bronital said grimly, pulling up his own data pad, contained what we now believe was either a clerical error or a deliberate political softening of the facts. Earth is designated as a Class 12 death world. Class 12, that puts it in the same category as Vrax Prime, which is actively volcanic, and Kreshtar, where the atmosphere is mildly acidic and it rains metal shards. Cassidy raised her hand slightly. To be fair, Earth is not that bad. I mean, yes, we have earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, wildfires, floods, droughts, blizzards, venomous everything, and predators that think humans are crunchy and good with ketchup. But you get used to it. You get used to it, Vexthorin repeated numbly. Sure. I mean, humans are pretty adaptable. It is kind of our thing. She shrugged. We are not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the smartest, probably, but we are really, really good at not dying when everything is trying to kill us. Which on Earth, everything is, constantly, it builds character. Dr. Helent made a note on her data pad. I am going to need to completely revise the human medical protocols, and possibly requisition stronger pain medication. For everyone else, when they realize what humans actually are. Vexthorin looked at his swollen, fractured appendage. Then at Cassidy, who was checking her own data pad for messages. Then back at his appendage. I need to contact my family, he said quietly. Yes, Brontal agreed. Yes, you do. Because this is going to get complicated. The student network at Kratzik Station Academy could distribute information faster than a quantum data burst. By the time Vexthorin was released from medical with his appendage in a regenerative cast and a prescription for heavy-duty pain suppressants, every single student in the facility knew what had happened. Most of them had seen the footage. All of them had opinions. The Varanthi students, typically confident in their own intellectual superiority, were huddled in the library running calculations. Piperiska had become an unofficial spokesperson, her datapad connected to the main display while a crowd gathered. Okay, so Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, she said, manipulators flying across her pad. That is almost exactly one standard galactic unit, which is why nobody thought twice about it. But look at this. She pulled up a comparative chart. Our homeworld, Verath, 0.7 standard. Frilla, 0.6. The Kefrit homeworld runs at 0.85. Even the Salakit, who everyone thinks are these unstoppable juggernauts, evolved on a world with 2.7 standard gravity. So what? Krilshan said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. 1 standard gravity is normal. That is the baseline. That is the baseline we use for station construction, you absolute fool, Hippariska snapped. Because it is the mathematical average across council member species. But it is not actually normal for most of us. Humans do not live at the average. They live at 1 full unit, all the time. Since birth, their entire evolutionary history was spent at that pressure. She pulled up another chart, this one showing Earth's rotation, axial tilt, and orbital mechanics. And it gets better. Their homeworld has extreme axial tilt, which means dramatic seasonal variation, temperature swings of 40 degrees or more. Their atmosphere has oxygen levels that would be toxic to half the species here if maintained long-term. They have weather patterns that regularly produce wind speeds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, and they just, deal with it? Build structures and complain about the forecast. A Frillian student named Quantal raised a delicate manipulator. Surely, the Deathworld classification is for the environment, not the inhabitants. Just because the planet is dangerous does not mean the species is. Piriska stared at him. The species evolved on the planet. They are shaped by it. Every single aspect of their biology is optimized to survive there. Their bone density, their muscle fiber composition, their cardiovascular system, their immune response, their brain chemistry that apparently makes them think charging at predators with pointed sticks is a reasonable survival strategy. She scrolled through more data. Do you know what the dominant predator on Earth was for most of their evolutionary history? Them. Humans. They are the apex predator on a Class 12 death world. Let that sink in. It was sinking in. Across the academy, in dormitories and common areas and study halls, students were having the same realization. The humans were not guests. They were not charity cases admitted for political reasons. They were survivors of an environment that would kill most galactic species within a solar rotation. The memes started almost immediately. Someone had edited the cafeteria footage to include dramatic music and slow-motion effects. It spread across the student network with the caption, "When you forget to check the spec sheet." Another showed Cassidy's completely neutral expression with the text, "Oh no." Anyway, a third featured a comparison chart of skull density measurements with increasingly alarmed reactions from various species. The faculty response was more measured, but no less panicked. Professor Kelvin, who taught advanced physics, pulled up Earth specifications during his lecture and spent 40 minutes recalculating force equations while his students watched in fascinated horror. If we assume an average human mass of 70 kilograms, he said, writing equations on the display board, and consistent exposure to 9.8 meters per second squared throughout their development, then their musculoskeletal system is under constant load equivalent to what most of us experience during high-stress physical activity. Constantly. Every moment of every day. Their bodies think that is resting state. A student raised a tentacle. "Professor, does that mean when they are here on the station at 1 standard gravity, they are effectively operating at reduced weight?" Professor Kelvin's scales shifted to a pale color that indicated distress. Yes, it does. They are carrying approximately 15 to 20% less effective mass than their bodies are calibrated for, which means their strength-to-weight ratio here is, ancestors, significantly higher than on their homeworld. So Cassidy was not even trying, someone whispered from the back. "Miss Morgan," Professor Kelvin corrected absently, still staring at his calculations, was standing still and letting physics do the work. Vex Thorin struck an object with greater density and structural integrity than his own manipulator could withstand. The outcome was inevitable. Meanwhile, in Headmaster Quellerex's office, the communication console had not stopped flashing for 2 hours. The Salkut family had indeed made contact. Loudly, repeatedly, with increasing amounts of what the translator politely rendered as vigorous disagreement. "My son is the victim here," Matriarch Valkeet was saying, her image dominating the hollow display. She was impressive even by Salakit standards, nearly 9 feet tall, with ceremonial armor that probably cost more than the entire medical bay. He was assaulted by this human. We demand her immediate expulsion and full restitution for damages. Orcs, who had now watched the security footage approximately 30 times, resisted the urge to disconnect the call. Matriarch, with all respect, your son initiated physical contact. The footage is quite clear on this point. He barely touched her. He struck her with sufficient force to fracture his own appendage. Rex pulled up the medical reports. Dr. Helenth's analysis is comprehensive. Your son attacked another student. That student defended herself by, and I am quoting the report here, existing in proximity to his fist. This is ridiculous. The Salkite have been members of the Galactic Council for 300 years. We have standing. We have reputation. We will not be humiliated by some upstart species from a backwater system. The backwater system in question, Rex said, his voice taking on an edge, is a Class 12 Deathworld that produces sapient persistence hunters with skeletal structures that make Durasteel look fragile. Perhaps your reputation should include not attacking them unprovoked. The matriarch's expression cycled through several colors. You are defending this human over my son. I am defending reality over convenient assumptions. Your son made an error, a significant one. The Academy will, of course, provide full medical support for his recovery, but there will be consequences for initiating violence against another student. We donate significantly to this institution. Yes, you do, and we appreciate it. But money does not change physics, Matriarch. Your son punched a human. He lost. Those are the facts. The call disconnected with what the system logged as excessive force to communication controls. Rex slumped in his chair and pulled up the enrollment files for the other human students. 6 more, scattered across various programs. All of them walking around with the bone density of armored personnel carriers, the muscle efficiency of high-performance machinery, and the casual durability of a species that thought natural selection was a fun challenge. We are going to need new insurance policies, he said to Tessica, and possibly warning signs. Do we have warning signs for humans? No, sir. Get some made. Something tasteful. Maybe caution. Deathworld species. Do not strike. Make sure it is in multiple languages. On the student network, someone had created a mock betting pool for the next human-related incident. The odds on another Salkite tries something stupid were surprisingly low. The odds on humans win interspecies athletics competition without trying were climbing rapidly. And in the cafeteria, at the same table where the incident had occurred, Cassidy sat with her datapad, working on homework, completely unaware that she had fundamentally altered the social dynamics of the most prestigious academy in known space by doing nothing more complicated than having a skull. The disciplinary hearing convened in the Grand Forum on Level 2, a space designed to accommodate multiple species in varying atmospheric and gravitational preferences. The adjudication panel consisted of 7 members representing the major student demographics, plus Headmaster Rex as chair. The gallery was packed. Apparently nothing drew a crowd like watching privilege collide with consequences. Vexthorn sat at the respondents' table, his appendage still in its regenerative cast, flanked by 2 legal representatives his family had hired. They were Corthaxian barristers, known for aggressive defense strategies and a win record that made most prosecutors nervous. They looked confident, expensive, ready for battle. Cassidy sat alone at the complainant's table, wearing the same casual station clothes she had been wearing in the cafeteria. She had a single datapad and a drink container that, according to the label, contained something called coffee. She looked like she would rather be literally anywhere else. This hearing will come to order, Quillax announced, his translation collar projecting his voice across the forum. We are here to address the incident that occurred in Sub-Level 9 Cafeteria 3rd Meal Rotation 4 days ago. The respondent Vexthorin Salakit stands accused of initiating unprovoked physical violence against fellow student Cassidy Morgan. How does the respondent plead? The lead barrister stood, all 4 of his arm appendages gesturing dramatically. Not guilty, Headmaster. My client maintains that this was a mutual altercation resulting from escalating tensions. Furthermore, we argue that my client is the injured party and deserves compensation for medical expenses and emotional trauma. A ripple went through the gallery. Someone made a noise that the translators struggled with, finally settling on derisive laughter. Very well, present your evidence. Quilnerex settled back in his chair. This was going to be painful. The barristers presented their case. They showed testimony from Vex Thorin's friends, all of whom carefully described the cafeteria argument as mutual and heated. They brought up Cassidy's newness to the Academy, suggesting cultural misunderstandings. They emphasized Vex Thorin's injuries, showing medical scans of the fractures in loving detail. My client, the lead barrister said, is a model student from a respected family. He has never been involved in any prior disciplinary actions. This human, by contrast, has been at the Academy for mere weeks. Who is more credible here? Security Chief Brontal stood, his 6 legs clicking against the floor as he approached the central display. If I may, Headmaster, proceed. Brontal pulled up the security footage, unedited, complete with audio and 3 different camera angles. This is what actually happened. The forum watched in silence as Vex Thorin casually backhanded Cassidy, watched her not move, watched him reach out again, watched him strike her head, watched him immediately recoil, cradling his appendage, watched Cassidy take a bite of cake and walk away. I count 2 instances of Vex Thorin initiating physical contact, Brontal said. 0 instances of Cassidy Morgan responding with violence. She did not strike back. She did not threaten. She did not even raise her voice. She existed, and his appendage broke against her skull. That is not mutual altercation. That is assault followed by immediate karmic consequences. The barristers huddled, whispering urgently. The confident posture had evaporated. We would like to call the complainant to testify, the lead barrister said, and there was a desperate edge to his voice now. Cassidy stood and walked to the testimony platform. She did not look nervous. She looked bored. Miss Morgan, the barrister began, is it true that you and my client had been arguing prior to the incident? Yes. And is it true that tensions were high? I mean, he seemed pretty worked up about cake. I was just hungry. But you refused to yield when he requested the item. Requested. Cassidy repeated the word like she was testing its flavor. He demanded, I move. I had reached the cake first. First come, first served is a pretty universal concept, I thought. Was I wrong about that? The barrister shifted tactics. My client comes from a species known for their strength and durability. Surely you understood that physical confrontation with a Salkite would be dangerous. Oh, I understood perfectly. Cassidy took a sip of her coffee. Which is why I did not hit him back. That would have been dangerous. For him. You are claiming you could have harmed my client. I am claiming I did not want to put anyone in the regeneration tank over chocolate cake. Which, for the record, was really good chocolate cake, so I understand the temptation. But no, I was not going to escalate to actual violence over dessert. I just stood there. He is the one who decided my face was a good striking surface. And you expect this panel to believe that you, a human, could harm a Salkite? Cassidy set down her coffee. Do you want a demonstration? Because I can tap his cast and show you exactly how much pressure it takes to make him regret his life choices. Again, Vex Thorin actually flinched. The gallery noticed. That will not be necessary, Wilrex said quickly. Miss Morgan, can you explain why you were uninjured by an impact that fractured Vex Thorin's appendage? Sure. Basic physics and evolutionary biology. I am from Earth. Earth has one standard gravity, which apparently is higher than most of you are used to. Our bones are dense because they have to be. Our skulls are especially dense because our brains are important. And evolution decided wrapping them in what is functionally organic armor was a good investment. She shrugged. He hit me hard enough to hurt himself. Not hard enough to hurt me. That is not my fault. Panel member Thrixnall, a Viranthi biologist, leaned forward. Miss Morgan, for the record, can you clarify Earth's actual Deathworld classification? Class 12. Though, honestly, I think the classification system is a bit dramatic. Yes, Earth has some challenges. Active tectonics, dynamic weather, biodiversity that includes a lot of things with teeth and venom and bad attitudes. But humans adapted. We are good at that. What kind of challenges are we talking about? Another panel member asked. Cassidy considered. Well, we have megafauna that can weigh several tons and consider humans food. We have weather systems that can level entire cities. We have seismic events that restructure geography. We have microscopic organisms that can kill us in horrible ways, so our immune systems are basically in constant warfare. Oh, and we have mosquitoes. which kill more humans per year than any other animal and are somehow still not extinct, which should tell you something about how hard things are to kill on Earth. The gallery had gone very quiet. And you just live there? Normally? The Thrixnol asked. I mean, it is home. You get used to it. Check the weather forecast. Get vaccinated. Don't pet the wildlife. Standard stuff. At the respondents' table, the barristers were frantically scrolling through datapads, reading up on Class 12 Deathworld specifications with expressions of mounting horror. Another human student, seated in the gallery, raised his hand. Can I add something? Quilnrex gestured permission. The student stood. My name is James Chen. Also human. Also from Earth. I just want to point out that Cassidy is being super modest. Humans do not just survive on Earth. We climb to the top of the food chain using persistence hunting, tool use, and spite. We are not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest in pure terms, but we do not quit, we do not stop, and we remember. You know what our ancestors did when they wanted to hunt something bigger and faster than them. They followed it, for days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. Then they ate it. That is human strategy. That is what we are. Another human student spoke up, a woman named Rachel Torres. Also, we domesticated wolves. We took apex predators and turned them into pets through selective breeding and friendship. We did this while also hunting mammoth-sized creatures with rocks tied to sticks. Just for context, the panel members looked at each other. Several had changed colors, indicating stress. Quilnrex cleared his throat. Thank you for that enlightening context. Does the defense have anything to add? The barristers conferred briefly. No, Headmaster. We rest our case. Everyone knew what that meant. They had nothing. No defense. No counter-argument. Just a client who had punched a human and learned an expensive lesson about assumptions. The verdict came down 48 hours later, which was record time for the Academy's disciplinary system. Normally these things dragged on for weeks while various parties negotiated and postured. Not this time. The evidence was too clear, the physics too straightforward, and frankly nobody wanted to prolong the embarrassment. Vexthorn received a formal reprimand on his permanent academic record, a 2-week suspension, mandatory enrollment in a conflict resolution seminar, and 100 hours of community service in the cafeteria he had disrupted. He was also required to issue a public apology to Cassidy Morgan, delivered in the same grand forum where the hearing had taken place. The apology was brief, painful, utterly lacking in the casual arrogance Vexthorn had previously worn like a second skin. He stood at the podium, cast still on his appendage, and read from a prepared statement that his barristers had almost certainly written for him. I made assumptions based on incomplete information, he said, his voice barely carrying across the forum. I initiated violence against another student. I was wrong. I apologized to Cassidy Morgan and to the Academy community for my actions. Cassidy, sitting in the front row because apparently she was required to attend, nodded once. Apology accepted. Do not do it again. The real punishment, though, was not official. It was social. Vexthorn's family, mortified by the galactic attention the incident had received, quietly reduced their public profile at the Academy. His former entourage scattered, unwilling to associate with someone who had become a living meme. He ate lunch alone now at tables far from the human students and kept his head down. Papriska, who had distanced herself immediately after pulling the Earth classification data, later admitted she felt bad for him. He was an arrogant fool, she told anyone who would listen. But he genuinely did not know. None of us did. The Academy failed to provide accurate information, and he paid the price for institutional incompetence. She was not wrong. 3 days after the verdict, Headmaster Quilnrex announced sweeping policy changes. First, all species classification data in orientation materials would be audited and corrected. No more rounding, no more political softening of facts. If a species came from a Class 12 Deathworld, the students would know about it up front. Second, a new mandatory course was added to the curriculum, Deathworld Species and Survival Adaptations. It would cover not just humans but the handful of other species from extreme environments who had been similarly underestimated over the years. Professor Kelvin was tapped to lead it, despite his protest that he taught physics, not xenobiology. Physics is why their bones do not break, Quilnrex told him. Physics is exactly what you need to teach. Third, and perhaps most significantly, The Academy established a formal exchange program for cultural education. Human students would give presentations about Earth. Other Deathworld species would share their experiences. The goal was understanding. The hope was fewer incidents of students punching each other and discovering uncomfortable truths about comparative anatomy. Cassidy Morgan became an accidental celebrity. She could not walk through a corridor without students staring, pointing, or occasionally asking for autographs. The student network had turned her into a legend. There were compilation videos of every time she appeared on security footage, usually just walking to class or studying in the library, with dramatic narration about Deathworld biology. She hated it. "I just want to study xenobiology," she told James Chen over lunch one day, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I did not come here to be famous for having a skull. Everyone has a skull. Mine just happens to be denser because my ancestors lived somewhere with actual gravity and predators that thought bipedal apes looked delicious. You could lean into it," James suggested. "Start a vlog. Humans explain Earth. Monetize the fear and fascination." "Absolutely not. That sounds exhausting." She poked at her food, some kind of Varanthi grain dish that was nutritious but bland. "I miss Earth food, real Earth food, with spices that would probably hospitalize half the students here." The capsaicin thing, she agreed. "I tried to explain to my Frillian roommate why humans eat peppers that cause chemical burns in our mouths for fun. She looked at me like I had confessed to recreational self-harm. I mean, technically it builds character." The other human students had adapted differently. Rachel Torres had started a combat sports club and was teaching interested aliens about human martial arts. The first session had 40 students, the second session had 12, after everyone realized that human flexibility and joint mobility was frankly horrifying to species with exoskeletons. James had joined the astrophysics research group and kept accidentally intimidating his lab partners by lifting equipment they needed 3 people to move. The alien students, for their part, were experiencing a collective recalibration of their understanding of the universe. The humans were not guests. They were not charity cases. They were survivors from a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and they had won. Some species found this terrifying. The Frillians, delicate and conflict-averse, gave human students a wide berth in corridors. Some found it fascinating. The Kefrits, who respected toughness, started inviting humans to their social gatherings, and some, like Piperiska, found it educational. "I was wrong about humans," she announced during one study session, her manipulators flying across her datapad as she compiled notes for a presentation. "We all were. We saw soft skin and assumed weakness. We did not consider that soft skin might be a feature, not a bug. Flexibility, adaptability, the ability to heal quickly from injuries that would permanently damage species with rigid exoskeletons." She looked up at Cassidy, who was working on homework at the same table. "You are not fragile. You are optimized for a different kind of survival." Cassidy glanced up from her xenobiology notes. "That is probably the nicest thing anyone has said about humans since we got here. Usually it is just variations on terrifying or potentially dangerous." "You are those things too," Piperiska said cheerfully, but in an educational way. 6 weeks after the incident, Cassidy finally reclaimed her normal routine. The staring had decreased. The whispers had mostly stopped. She could eat lunch without someone asking her to describe Earth's most dangerous predators or explain how humans survived before modern medicine. She sat in the cafeteria, at the same table where everything had started, working on her datapad. There was chocolate cake on her tray. She had reached it first, and this time nobody questioned her claim. Across the room, Vexthorn was finishing his community service shift, cleaning tables and collecting trays. He glanced in her direction once, briefly, then looked away quickly. Cassidy did not notice. She was too busy studying cellular adaptation in silicon-based life forms, completely absorbed in the actual reason she had come to Krathazik Station Academy in the first place. To learn, to study, to understand the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy, and occasionally, apparently, to teach everyone else a lesson about assumptions, physics and the inadvisable nature of punching a species that evolved, dodging meteor strikes and wrestling predators for fun. But mostly the learning thing. That was the part that mattered. Maybe the question is not why humans are so hard to break. Maybe the real question is why, after surviving a world that tried to kill them every day, they still choose restraint over rage. If strength was only about violence, Earth would never have lasted this long. So, ask yourself, would you trust the species that can fight or the one that chooses not to?